He didn't know why he expected the mountains to feel familiar. They didn't. They felt bigger than they had in his childhood memories, the peaks sharper, the air colder, as if time had been quietly carving them into something more unforgiving while he was away. The sky was a faded sheet of pale gray, thin strips of light slipping through where the clouds tore open. The air smelled of wet pine, old stone, and the faint sweetness of decaying leaves. Every breath Jacob drew scraped a little at his lungs, not because of the climb, but because of what waited at the end of it. He shifted the weight of the worn backpack on his shoulders and glanced down at the boy walking beside him. Ethan's small hand was wrapped around his, fingers chilled but steady. 7 years old, too quiet, too observant. The kind of child who watched the world carefully before deciding when to speak. His brown hair stuck out from beneath a knit hat someone at the shelter had given him. And his eyes, those same gray-brown eyes that used to belong to his mother, kept flicking from the dirt road to the forest around them, curious and cautious at the same time. "You okay, buddy?" Jacob asked, squeezing his fingers gently. Ethan nodded. "My feet hurt a little," he admitted. "But it's okay. We're almost there, right?" Almost there. The words landed heavy. They'd been saying that for days. On city sidewalks, on bus stations' cold benches, on the dusty seat of an old coach that rattled its way toward the foothills, and finally, on this cracked mountain road that twisted higher and higher into thinning air. "Yeah," Jacob said. "We're close." He hoped he wasn't lying. The letter was folded neatly in the inside pocket of his jacket, edges already gone soft from how many times he'd taken it out, reread it, wondered if it was a joke from a cruel universe. The envelope had arrived at the shelter 2 weeks earlier, delivered by a postal worker who eyed the building with a mixture of pity and impatience. "Any Jacobs here?" He'd called into the common room. Jacob had raised his hand, more out of habit than expectation. No one sent letters to a man who'd run through his phone contacts like matches, burning bridges without intending to, until there was no one left to call. The return address had been smudged by rain. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar in a way that hurt. His grandmother had written like that, pressing too hard with the pen, each letter a little crooked, as if her words were trying to walk on uneven ground. But she died when he was 12. Or at least, that's what his father had told him, standing in the kitchen with that blank, shut-down look that meant the conversation was over. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of yellowed paper. "You have a right to what is yours," it said. "Come back to the mountain. The old house is waiting." Underneath, in smaller, shakier letters, "I'm sorry it took so long." Taped to the bottom corner was a key, heavy, old, the kind that didn't belong to apartment doors or lockers, but to something built by hands that thought in stone and wood. No name, no explanation, no instructions. Just a pull in his chest he couldn't ignore. He hadn't told Ethan everything. How could he explain to a 7-year-old that they were walking toward a past he'd spent half his life trying to bury? So he stuck to the simple truth. "We're going to see where I grew up," he'd said back at the shelter. "Up in the mountains." Ethan had smiled for the first time in days. "Will there be trees?" he asked. "And rocks and birds and stuff?" "A lot of trees," Jacob said. "More than you've ever seen." And now they were here. The bus had only taken them so far. After that, it was just this road, the forest thickening on either side, the mountains rising like watchmen around them. The wind threaded through the pines, carrying a low, continuous whisper. "It's cold," Ethan said, but there was no complaint in it, just an observation. "It's colder up here," Jacob replied, "but the air's cleaner." He inhaled deeply, filling his chest with it. It tasted like rain and smoke and memory. "Feels like God's closer," he added before he could stop himself. Ethan looked up at him, eyes serious. Was he far away in the city? Jacob swallowed. "No," he said. "I think I was just too busy being scared to notice him." The boy nodded, as if that made perfect sense. The road curved, and suddenly the trees parted enough to reveal the first glimpse of the higher ridge. The outline of old stone foundations appeared like broken teeth along the slope. Silhouettes of houses that had once stood, but now were nothing more than moss-covered ghosts. The mountain settlement. What was left of it, anyway? Jacob's chest tightened. He remembered running between those houses as a boy, barefoot and fearless, his grandmother calling after him to be home before dark, her voice carrying over the wind. He remembered her small hands, rough from work, placing a warm bowl of stew in front of him on cold nights. He remembered her whispering prayers over his sleeping head when she thought he didn't hear. He also remembered his father's silence whenever her name came up. "We're going up there?" Ethan asked quietly. "Yeah," Jacob said. "Our place is at the top." "Our place?" The words tasted strange, even to him. "I mean, her place, my grandmother's. Maybe ours now, if there's anything left of it." They left the cracked asphalt behind and stepped onto a narrow path that cut uphill through the trees. Here, the forest closed in more tightly, the trunks closer together, branches knit overhead like a rough canopy. The ground was soft and damp, leaves gathering in thick piles. Their footsteps were muffled. For a while, they walked in silence. Just the sound of their breathing and the occasional rustle of some unseen creature darting away. A squirrel chattered angrily from a branch near them, tail flicking. Ethan grinned up at it. "It's like a movie," he whispered. "Which part?" "The part before something important happens." Jacob let out a soft huff of laughter. "Yeah," he said. "Feels that way." Inside, he was battling more than the climb. Every tree, every bend, every rock seemed to hold a flicker of an old scene. Him falling and scraping his knee on that exact stone. His grandmother sitting on that stump, shelling peas. The day his father had dragged him down this path, suitcase in hand, saying they weren't coming back, saying the mountain was done with them. Or maybe they were done with it. John had never been sure which one hurt more. "Were you happy here?" Ethan asked suddenly. The question hit harder than the cold. Jacob took a breath, watching it fog in the air. "Sometimes," he said honestly. "Sometimes more than any other place in my life. And sometimes not at all. It was quiet, safe. But people can still hurt you, even in beautiful places." Ethan was quiet for a few steps. "Do you think God liked you more here than in the city?" he asked. The kid had a way of going straight for the heart. Jacob shook his head. "I don't think he loves us because of where we are," he said. "I think he comes to find us wherever we're lost, even on cold streets, even in bounced-around buses, even on mountain roads, when we don't know what we're walking toward." Ethan absorbed that, eyes on the trail, boots crunching through leaves. "So he's walking with us now?" "I'm counting on it," Jacob said. A thin beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, reaching down between the branches and landing on a patch of moss ahead. It glowed an almost unreal green. Ethan stepped on it carefully, like crossing a small enchanted island. "Feels like it," the boy said softly. They climbed for another 20 minutes before the trees thinned, and the path widened into what had once been the main lane of the little mountainside community. Now it was a scattering of crumbling stone walls, collapsed roofs, and chimney stubs standing stubbornly against the sky. Some houses were nothing but rectangular outlines buried in leaves. Others still held pieces of themselves, leaning, sagging, but present. The wind was different here, quieter, as if carrying too much memory to rush. "Wow," Ethan breathed. "It's like a lost village." "That's what my grandmother called it," Jacob said. "Her kingdom of forgotten people." "Why forgotten?" "Because the world kept moving," Jacob said. "The town in the valley got bigger. Jobs moved away. Young people left. Old people died. The mountain didn't ask anyone to stay." He scanned the settlement, searching. There, near the back, nestled against a steep wall of rock, was a small stone house with a crooked chimney and a front step leaning to one side. The roof was patched with mismatched tiles. One of the shutters hung at an angle, but the cracked window pane beneath it was still there. The sight hit him like a punch. "That one," he whispered. "That's where she lived." Ethan followed his gaze. "It looks tired," he said gently. "Yeah," Jacob replied. "Don't we all?" As they approached, he noticed details that hadn't been visible from a distance. Someone had cleared some of the weeds from around the front porch. The path to the door, though cracked and uneven, was less overgrown than he'd expected. And the door itself, old thick wood bound with iron, showed signs of recent use. The metal around the keyhole was cleaner, less rusted. His stomach tightened. They weren't the first ones here. His instinct told him to turn around. His desperation told him to keep walking. He chose desperation and called it faith. At the bottom of the 3 worn steps, he stopped and looked at the door for a moment. It was like standing at the border between then and now. His grandmother's laugh seemed to echo faintly in his ears. Her hands, always busy at something. Her voice whispering bedtime prayers. He had loved her, and then she was gone, swallowed by a silence no one explained. "Dad?" Ethan whispered. "You okay?" Jacob forced a breath out and nodded. "Yeah," he lied. "Let's see what's inside." He put his hand into his jacket and pulled out the key. It was cold and heavy, bitten by time. When he slid it into the lock, it turned so easily he almost stumbled forward with the motion. Someone had oiled it recently. He glanced at the ground. The dirt around the doorstep held faint impressions of boots, some small, some larger, their edges softened by weather, but still visible. "Someone else came here," Ethan said, noticing too. "Yeah," Jacob murmured. "Looks like it." He pushed the door. It groaned, the sound dragging through the quiet like the first word after a long silence. Cold, stale air seeped out, carrying with it the smell of dust, old wood, and something else. Faded lavender. His grandmother's scent wrapped around him, unexpected and sharp. His eyes stung. He stepped inside. The single main room revealed itself slowly as his eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the dirty windows. A stone hearth took up most of one wall, blackened by years of use. A small cast-iron stove sat beside it. Shelves lined another wall, some still holding jars of dried plants long since turned brittle and colorless. A rickety table stood in the center. 2 mismatched chairs tucked beneath it. In the corner, under a narrow window, was a cot with a folded quilt on top. A quilt Jacob recognized instantly. Patchwork squares of old shirts and dresses, all sewn together by his grandmother's patient, crooked stitches. For a moment, he couldn't move. It was like the house had been waiting in the exact posture he remembered, frozen mid-breath. But then, like a stain on the illusion, he saw it. The difference. The disturbance. A long streak across the dusty floor where something heavy had been dragged. Traces of footprints overlapping, some circling, some leading toward the far wall where a wooden chest sat tucked against the stones. The chest was familiar, too. He'd once been told never to touch it. It had felt like a dragon's hoard when he was little. Now the lid was slightly ajar. His heartbeat quickened. "Dad?" Ethan said softly. "Someone was here before us." "Yeah," Jacob replied. "I see that." He guided his son toward a chair. "Sit there for a second. Don't move, okay?" Ethan obeyed, wide-eyed, watching every step his father took. Jacob crossed the room slowly, tracing the drag mark with his gaze. The chest was old, iron-banded, the wood darkened by time. He could see the faint outline in the dust on its lid where something rectangular had been placed for many years. The lid creaked when he lifted it. Inside, there was nothing, just an empty hollow carved by expectation. Dust clung to the sides, but at the bottom, carved into the wood, he saw initials burned deep by a careful hand, M.W., and above them, scratched more roughly, J.M.W., his grandmother's name, his own, Jacob Matthew Walker. His heart lurched. Whatever had been in there, it had been meant for him. "Dad?" Ethan's voice trembled. "Is it bad?" Jacob stared at the empty space, as if will alone might rewind time and place whatever had been there back where it belonged. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but someone got here first." "Maybe they needed it more," Ethan whispered. "Children had a way of seeing mercy where adults saw theft." Jacob wanted to agree, wanted to be that generous, but the ache in his chest argued. "Maybe," he said, closing the lid gently. The sound echoed in the small room. He straightened and looked around again, searching for any other change, any hint of who else had been in this space. That's when he noticed the envelope pinned beneath a small stone on the table. His name again. Jacob. The same shaky handwriting as the first letter. His fingers felt clumsier than they should as he unfolded it. "If you're reading this, you came. I prayed you would. Forgive me for the years. Forgive your father. I didn't die. I was hidden. It's a long story, and if God is kind, I'll have time to tell you properly. For now, know this. What was in that chest was never just money. It was a key to something older, something dangerous, something people have waited a long time to find. I left you a share. But others came hunting too. Be careful who you trust. Follow the marks on the rock behind the house. I'll explain when I can. Love, Gran." Jacob read it twice, breath shallow. The paper trembled in his grip. Ethan watched him, anxiously. "What does it say?" the boy asked. Before Jacob could answer, the floorboard by the door creaked. The sound wasn't memory this time. It was present, heavy, undeniable. He turned sharply, putting himself between the door and his son without thinking. A figure stood just inside the threshold, framed by the gray mountain light. A tall man in a dark coat, hood pushed back, rain-damp hair clinging to his forehead. His boots were muddy. His eyes were the kind that had seen too much. A scar traced a pale line along his jaw. He lifted his hands slowly, palms open, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Easy," the man said, voice low, steady. "I'm not here to hurt you." Jacob's muscles tensed anyway. "Who are you?" he demanded. The stranger's gaze flicked from Jacob to Ethan, then to the chest, then back to the letter in Jacob's hand. Something like relief flashed across his face. "My name is Daniel," he said quietly. "And if that letter brought you here—" He swallowed. "Then I think I've been looking for you for a very long time." Jacob didn't lower his stance at first. Too many years of sleeping with one eye open had taught him that danger often introduced itself gently. He kept his body angled in front of Ethan, shielding the boy as Daniel stepped fully inside, closing the heavy wooden door behind him with deliberate, quiet caution. The sound of the latch settling echoed through the small stone house, sealing them in with a stranger who seemed to know far more than he let on. For a moment, the three of them simply stood there, held in a tense silence, thick enough to feel. Dust motes drifted lazily in the thin light coming through the window, floating between them like suspended breath. Daniel kept his hands raised, palms still forward. "You look just like him," he said softly. "Your father. Younger, maybe, but same eyes." The words cut through Jacob like a cold blade. He felt Ethan press closer to his leg, sensing the sharp shift in the air. "You knew my father?" Jacob asked, voice low, controlled. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, I knew him. A long time ago, before things broke apart." His gaze moved briefly around the room, lingering on the empty chest, the unsettled dust patterns, the lonely cot pushed against the wall. "I was hoping I'd get here before the others did. Guess I wasn't lucky." "What others?" Jacob asked. "Who was here?" Daniel exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "People who've been tracking your grandmother's trail for years. People who believe she had something they wanted, something hidden in this house or somewhere connected to it." Jacob's chest tightened. And what would that be? Daniel's eyes met his. They were dark, rimmed with exhaustion, but steady. "A map," he said. "Not a treasure map. A lineage map. A set of old land boundaries tied to mineral claims that should have expired decades ago, but because of some loophole in the old mountain records, those claims, if proven, would make whoever holds them very, very rich." Jacob blinked. "We're talking about money? Not cash," Daniel said. "Land rights, deep rights, the kind that companies would kill to get their hands on." Ethan's fingers tightened around Jacob's sleeve at that word. Kill. Jacob instinctively placed a hand on his son's shoulder, steadying him. "So, what does any of that have to do with me?" he demanded. Daniel hesitated, then spoke slowly. "Your grandmother was the last known holder of the original hand-drawn boundary map. She inherited it from her father, and she was supposed to pass it to her heir." "Me?" Jacob asked. "Yes," Daniel said gently. "You." Jacob stepped back as if the air had suddenly grown heavier. "Then why did my father tell me she was dead? Why lie about that?" Daniel looked down. "Because he didn't want this life for you. Or maybe because he wanted to keep you safe. Or maybe because he didn't want anything to do with the fight that came with this mountain. I don't know. Your father was complicated." Jacob's jaw flexed. You're not telling me everything. No, Daniel admitted. Not yet. He lowered his hands finally, slipping them into the pockets of his coat. But I didn't come here to threaten you. I came here because I promised your grandmother I would find you when the time was right. That letter, Jacob said. You knew about it. Daniel nodded. She told me she wrote it months ago. Left instructions in case she couldn't reach you herself. Why couldn't she reach me? Why not call? Why not come find me? Jacob asked, voice shaking despite himself. Daniel's eyes softened. Because she wasn't well enough to travel. She's alive, Jacob, but time hasn't been kind. The words hit like a falling stone. Jacob sat down heavily in the nearest chair, the wood creaking beneath him. For years he'd pictured her gone, buried, erased. To hear she was still breathing, somewhere out there, made the room tilt. Ethan climbed onto his lap, sensing the tremor running through him. Jacob wrapped an arm around the boy instinctively, grounding himself. Where is she? He whispered. Daniel didn't answer right away. He pulled a folded, weather-worn paper from his coat pocket and set it on the table between them. Before I tell you that, he said, you need to see this. Jacob reached out hesitantly and unfolded the paper. It was a letter, written in the same shaky script as the note left on the table earlier. My dear boy, if you are reading this, then God has given me more time than I thought. I prayed every night that he would bring you home. Not for the land, not for the past, but because I needed to see your face again. There are things I couldn't tell you before, things your father wouldn't. I am not hiding because I am afraid of death. I am hiding because others are afraid of what I know. Trust Daniel. He is my hands now. And please, find your way back to forgiveness. For his sake. For yours. Heavier words followed underneath in smaller strokes. I love you more than the mountain, more than the sun on the ridge, more than my own breath. Jacob felt the burn behind his eyes before he even finished reading. He blinked hard, but tears welled anyway. Ethan lifted a hand and wiped his cheek with the sleeve of his jacket. Dad, it's okay. Jacob nodded, though his throat felt too tight to speak for a moment. Daniel watched him quietly, respectfully. Where is she? Jacob asked again once he found his voice. Daniel pulled another slip of paper from his coat. This one small, creased, marked with a hastily drawn symbol, a circle with 3 branching lines. She's in the lower West Ridge. There's an old caretaker's cabin there. Used to belong to a man who worked for your great-grandfather. She moved there when things got dangerous. Dangerous how? Jacob asked. Daniel hesitated, choosing his words. Someone else is looking for her. Someone who thinks she knows where that boundary map ended up. And does she? She did, Daniel said quietly. But months back, she asked me to deliver the chest, the one that used to be here, to a safe location. She said it was for you. Jacob's heart thudded. Then why is it empty? Because someone else got to the safe location first, Daniel replied. I was too late. Ethan looked between them, worry wrinkling his small forehead. Dad, is the bad person coming here too? Jacob pulled the boy closer. Not with me here, he said firmly. Daniel didn't argue. Instead, he moved toward the window and looked outside, scanning the tree line. I didn't see anyone following me, he murmured. But the mountain carries sound differently at dusk. Hard to tell. Jacob stood, adrenaline slowly cutting through the haze of emotion. "We need to go find her," he said. "Tonight." Daniel turned. "It's almost dark." "Then we hurry," Jacob replied. "I'm not waiting until morning." Daniel studied him for a moment, his resolve, the protective brace of his arm around Ethan, the grief swirling under the surface. Then he nodded. "All right," he said, "but we'll need supplies. The cabin is another 2 miles up the ridge, and the trail isn't as kind as it used to be." Jacob felt the weight of exhaustion tug at his shoulders, but he pushed through it. "We can manage." Daniel grabbed a lantern from the wall and struck a match. Warm, yellow light spread across the small room, making the shadows dance. "Take whatever you need," he said. Jacob scanned the shelves, finding a few old blankets folded neatly, a tin cup, a bundle of dried herbs tied with string, likely remnants from years ago, but still useful for warmth or scent if burned. He grabbed the blankets first and draped one around Ethan's shoulders. The boy clutched it, close, burying his face in the wool, as if storing the warmth for later. The lantern's glow flickered across the dusty wooden floor, illuminating footprints, multiple sets, some leading toward the back door. "Daniel," Jacob said slowly, "did you come in through the back?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I didn't even know there was a back door." A chill prickled across Jacob's spine. "And someone was here today." Daniel moved quickly to the door, checking the latch. "It's unlocked," he said. "Was it like that when you got here?" "I don't know," Jacob said. "I didn't check." Daniel swore under his breath. "We need to leave. Now." Jacob didn't argue. He lifted Ethan into his arms, the boy's legs instinctively tightening around his waist. The house seemed to tense with them, the silence shifting from nostalgic to cautious. Daniel grabbed the lantern, opened the front door quietly, and stepped into the fading light. The sky outside had darkened into a muted blue, streaked with the last hints of sunset sinking behind the mountain peaks. The air had grown colder, biting at their skin. The forest rustled with the cautious movements of night creatures waking. "Stay close," Daniel said as they stepped onto the leaf-covered path leading west. "The ridge trail gets narrow." Jacob walked just behind him, Ethan wrapped securely in his arms. The boy's head rested against his shoulder, but he wasn't asleep. His eyes remained alert, watching the shifting shapes of trees and rocks, as if memorizing the route. "Dad," he whispered, "what if Grandma doesn't remember you?" Jacob's grip tightened. "She will," he murmured. "Some things don't forget." They climbed in silence for a while, the only sounds their footsteps and the lantern's faint glass rattle. The trail narrowed, winding between boulders and thick roots. Daniel moved steadily, checking over his shoulder every few minutes. Jacob appreciated it more than he said. Halfway up they reached an old wooden footbridge spanning a narrow ravine. The boards creaked under Daniel's weight. Jacob paused before stepping onto it. "Safe?" "Safer than going around," Daniel said. "The slope on the left side washed out last winter." Jacob nodded and stepped forward. The bridge swayed slightly, the sound of distant water rushing below them. Ethan buried his face in Jacob's shoulder again. "Almost there," Jacob whispered, rubbing his back gently. When they reached the other side, Daniel lifted the lantern and pointed to a faint mark carved into a tree trunk ahead, a circle with 3 branching lines. "Same symbol as the note," Jacob said. "Gran's mark," Daniel replied. She always believed the mountain had its own language. These were her way of talking back. They followed the marks deeper into the woods, each one carved into a tree or stone along the path. The carvings grew fresher the higher they climbed, the lines cleaner, less weathered. She did these recently, Daniel said quietly. She wanted you to find her. Jacob's pace quickened. His grandmother's voice filled his memory, soft, warm, humming old hymns as she stirred soup in a cast-iron pot. He thought of all the years he'd imagined her gone, all the nights he'd prayed without knowing he was praying for her. Thank God, he whispered, breath trembling. Thank God she's still here. At last, the trees parted into a small clearing tucked into a natural hollow of the ridge. A stone chimney rose from a wooden structure barely larger than a tool shed. Smoke curled from the top, thin, steady, recent. She's alive, Jacob breathed. He didn't wait for Daniel. He rushed forward, nearly tripping on a root, heart pounding so hard it shook his chest. Ethan lifted his head, sensing the shift in his father's urgency. The cabin door was slightly ajar, a warm glow spilling out across the grass. Jacob raised a hand and pushed it open, breath held tight. Inside, a small fire crackled softly in a stone hearth. A kettle steamed on a trivet. Blankets were folded neatly along a bench. And sitting in a wooden chair by the fire, wrapped in a thick shawl, was an old woman with silver hair braided over one shoulder. Her face was lined, her posture thin and tired, but her eyes, those faded blue eyes Jacob remembered kneeling in front of as a child, lifted toward him. She blinked slowly, then her breath hitched. Jacob? Her voice was soft, brittle, but unmistakable. His knees buckled. He sank to the floor, Ethan still in his arms, tears breaking free despite every effort to hold them back. Gran? She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, shoulder shaking. My boy, she whispered. My sweet boy. You came home. And in that small mountain cabin, with fire warming the shadows around them, Jacob felt something he hadn't felt in years, something he thought he'd lost for good. A piece of his heart, long buried, found its way back to him. The mountain had brought him home. God had brought him home. And the story wasn't over yet. The old woman's hand trembled as she reached for him, the firelight carving shadows into the wrinkles of her face. But beneath all that frailty, Jacob still saw the woman who used to feel as solid as the mountain itself. He sank to his knees beside her chair, setting Ethan gently at his side. The boy hovered close, studying this stranger who somehow belonged to him. I thought you were dead, Jacob whispered, the words stumbling out on a shaky breath. His grandmother's lips curved in a sad little smile. So, did the men who wanted me gone, she replied softly. But God is stubborn when he wants someone to stay. He kept me around longer than anyone expected. I've been waiting for you, boy. Her voice was brittle but warm. Daniel moved quietly around the small cabin, pouring steaming water from the kettle into a chipped mug. He added a pinch of herbs, handed it to her like he'd done it 100 times. She took it, fingers shaking, then turned her eyes fully to Jacob. Let me see you, she murmured. Last time, all I saw was your back, going down the path with your father. He wouldn't look at me. You did? But only once. You were crying. Jacob felt the old wound twist. He said you died, he said. Said the mountain took you. He believed that was kinder than the truth, she murmured. He thought if he cut you off from this land, from me, the men chasing our name would stop looking at you. He was wrong about many things, but not about that danger. Ethan leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. What danger? Her gaze softened when she looked at him. You must be Ethan, she said. You've got your father's shoulders and your mother's eyes. I only met her in stories, but that's enough for me. The boy swallowed. Did you really send that letter? I did, she answered, with hands that don't always do what I tell them anymore. I had to. There are things your father never knew. Things your great-grandfather asked me to protect when this mountain turned from home into battleground. She shifted slightly, wincing but refusing help, and drew the shawl tighter around her shoulders. Your great-grandfather found something in the rock, years before you were born, she began. A vein of mineral so valuable, it made men lose their minds. He filed the claim, the right way, with witnesses and lawyers and maps, thinking it would secure a future for his children. He was naive, but not wicked. Her eyes clouded. That claim lit a fire under greedy feet, men from the valley, men from the city. They came smiling, waving contracts, promising roads and jobs and a school with shiny windows. Every deal ended with us losing everything and them gaining the land and the right to rip it apart. Jacob listened, feeling the pieces of his childhood he hadn't understood start to slide into place. He refused them, she continued. Said God didn't show him that vein, so strangers could poison the water and slice open the hills. After that, accidents started happening. Broken fences, slashed tires, a lantern missing when he swore he'd hung it. One night, he went out to check the boundary markers. Her voice cracked. They brought him back before dawn and said he slipped on the rocks. The silence following those words felt heavy. Ethan's hand found Jacob's without looking. Your father saw all that, she whispered. Saw what stubbornness cost. When your grandfather died, those men came to me, told me a widow shouldn't hold so much ground, told me I should sign everything away for my own good. I refused. So your father did the only thing his fear could invent. He took you, and went so far, the mountain couldn't see you anymore. I let him. That's the part I ask forgiveness for. Jacob shook his head, throat thick. You thought that would keep me safe. I hoped it would, she said. I didn't reckon with how a broken man might turn his pain outward. He loved you, Jacob, but he didn't know how to carry all that loss. So he drank it, and he lied about me. Said I was dead, so you wouldn't ask to come back. He never talked about this place, Jacob said. Just swore he'd never go up the mountain again. He was scared, she said simply. But the mountain doesn't forget its own, nor does God. When those men started digging in old records again, hunting for heirs, I knew time was running short. That's when I wrote you. Jacob glanced at Daniel. And he? He used to work for them, his grandmother said, nodding toward him. He saw too much, quit when he realized his clipboard was just another kind of weapon. God turned his guilt into something useful. I call it a fair trade. Daniel gave a faint, self-conscious smile. I knew there were original claims still somewhere up here, he added. Ones the company never could find. Your grandmother trusted me enough to show me maps your great-grandfather drew. When threats started again, she came up here to hide. I tried to keep them off her trail, but Crow is persistent. Ethan frowned. Is he the bad guy? He's a man who forgot that enough is a word, the grandmother said. But we're not here to talk about him. We're here because you have a choice to make. Jacob looked at her, confused. Choice? This family's been running from this land and clinging to it at the same time, she said. Someone has to decide what to do with what your great-grandfather left us. Let it fester into something cursed, or let it become something that blesses more people than it harms. She reached for his hand and turned his palm up. You came here with nothing, she whispered. No job, no house, no safety except the kind you built around this boy with your arms and your prayers. That tells me something about what kind of man you are now. You know how it feels to have nothing. That makes you dangerous to greed. Jacob exhaled shakily. I don't feel dangerous, he said. I feel tired. God does his best work with tired people who still say yes, she replied. Your yes brought you back. My job is to show you what you're saying yes to. Slowly, with effort, she pushed herself to her feet. Jacob rose quickly to support her, but she shooed away most of the help with stubborn dignity. We're going back to the house, she said. Your inheritance isn't up here in this cabin. It's built into those walls your father hated. A spark of old defiance flickered in her eyes. I'm done hiding. If trouble wants to find me, it can knock on my own front door. The walk back down felt different than the climb up. They moved more slowly, not from fear this time, but because the old woman's steps were careful. Ethan trotted between Jacob and Daniel, one hand in each, asking small, quiet questions about owls and stars and whether their new life would have neighbors. By the time they reached the clearing, the sky had shifted into deep blue. The car was gone. The settlement lay still, the stones and broken walls bathed in a faint, cool glow. The mountain house waited at the far edge, hunched yet solid against the rock wall. Inside, it smelled of dust and smoke and faint lavender, just like before. But with his grandmother standing in the doorway, it felt less haunted, more like it had been waiting for its people to return. Look, she said, gesturing toward the mantel as they gathered around the hearth. All those years you were gone, this sat here in plain sight. Your father thought it was just decoration. Maybe part of him knew better and didn't want to. Jacob leaned in. Up close, the carvings in the wood resolved from random grooves into something deliberate. A winding line for the river, jagged curves for the ridges, small etched marks where landmarks lay. It's the mountain, he breathed, mapped right into the house. One of his small rebellions, she replied. You can burn paper, you can lose files, but you'd have to tear this wall down to erase this story. She moved to the base of the hearth then, fingers skimming the stones with practiced familiarity. He liked tricks, your great-grandfather. Said if God could hide fossils in rocks, he could hide a few secrets too. She pressed down on one particular stone, and Jacob heard a faint click. A section of the hearth's lower front shifted inward. Together, he and Daniel pulled it aside, revealing a shallow cavity lined with wood. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, rested a small bundle. Hands shaking, Jacob lifted it out and unwrapped it. Old papers lay inside, neatly folded. The ink had faded, but the signatures were still clear. Alongside them sat a leather notebook, worn from handling. The grandmother watched his face. Those are the original filings, she said. Every inch of land your great-grandfather claimed, with witnesses and dates. The notebook is where he wrote about the men who came later. Names, offers, threats. He wanted whoever carried this burden after him to know exactly what they were up against. Jacob thumbed through the notebook, seeing cramped lines of careful handwriting, small sketches of logos and faces, quotes from conversations that sounded eerily similar to the way Crow had spoken. It felt like holding both a weapon and a confession. He carefully set it down. Why wait until now? He asked. Why not send these away? Put them in some bank or lawyer's office? Because paper doesn't care about souls, she answered. Lawyers don't tuck your grandson in at night. I needed them somewhere I could touch them while I begged God for the right time. When I heard you'd lost your job, that you were wandering, I thought maybe that meant the time had come. A man who's been broken might know what not to break. Jacob looked at Ethan, who was tracing the carved map gently with one fingertip. I don't know the first thing about mineral rights, he said. I don't know how to fight people like Crow without becoming like them. That's why you're not doing this alone, Daniel said quietly. I know their tricks. I know who's clean and who isn't. And there are companies now that do things differently. They won't give you a mansion on a hill, but they'll sign agreements that protect the streams, limit the digging, and share profits with the town. The grandmother nodded. Your great-grandfather dreamed of that, she said. He wanted the mountain to feed his family and his neighbors, not strangers in glass towers. He just lived too early for the right tools. Jacob swallowed, heart pounding. And if I say no, if I walk away, then these go in the fire, she said simply. Better ash than wickedness. But I don't think that's why God dragged you back here with a child hanging onto your hand. The room was quiet except for the soft crackle of the fire. Jacob stared at the documents, at the notebook, at the carved map. For years, he'd felt like life happened to him without his consent. Jobs lost, doors closed, beds taken away because rules changed. For the first time, something lay in front of him that felt like a choice, heavy but not cruel. Ethan broke the silence with a whisper. If we do this good, does that mean other kids won't have to sleep in cars? His small voice slid straight under Jacob's ribs. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the decision had settled in his chest, like a stone dropping into deep water. We do it right, he said quietly. Or not at all. We protect the water, put money first into roofs and food and work, and if at any point it starts smelling like Crow, we burn every last paper and let the mountain keep its secrets. The grandmother's shoulders relaxed, a long, exhausted exhale leaving her lungs. That's all I ever wanted, she murmured. Someone to hold this without letting it poison them. She leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking smaller but lighter. Now I can rest. Panic flickered in Jacob. Don't talk like that, he said. We just got you back. I'm not going tomorrow, she said, a faint smile touching her lips. But I'm closer to the finish line than you. That's not sad, Jacob. It just means I get to watch the start of something instead of the end. She reached for his hand again. Promise me one more thing. He squeezed her fingers. I promise before I hear it? You might as well. She chuckled weakly. You never were good at saying no to me. Her eyes softened. When the money comes, and it will, slowly, if you do this right, don't let it tell you who you are. You're not a man with land. You're a man who lost everything and still thanked God for soup. Hold on to that version of yourself. Let whatever comes sit in your open hands, not wrap around your heart. Tears blurred his vision. I'll try, he said. Better than trying, she whispered. Pray it every day. God, don't let this blessing become my master. Keep me small enough to hear you. Ethan stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her thin shoulders. She kissed the top of his head. You, she said softly, are why he kept me alive this long. I asked him to let me see my grandson's child before I went home. He answered bigger than I deserved. In the days that followed, the mountain house began to change in small, hopeful ways. Broken glass was replaced. Leaks were patched. A rug someone from the Valley Church donated covered the coldest part of the floor. Daniel drove back and forth to town, quietly lining up meetings with people who didn't flinch when he said words like limits and water testing and profit sharing. The sheriff dropped by more than once, making it clear in his casual country way that any more cars like crows sneaking up the ridge would be met with more than a polite chat. One chilly evening, as the sun slipped behind the peaks and painted the sky in faint rose and gray, Jacob stood outside splitting wood. Ethan sat on the step, drawing on a scrap of paper, his own version of the mantle map, complete with little X's where he'd found important spots, like the rock shaped like a chair, and the tree Teddy, the stray dog that had adopted them later, liked to sleep under. For the first time in years, Jacob's mind wasn't constantly calculating the next move, the next couch, the next shelter line. He still didn't know exactly how things would unfold with the contracts, or how long his grandmother's health would hold, or whether Crow would resurface in some different, subtler form. But underneath all the questions was something steady. They weren't wandering anymore. That night, after Ethan fell asleep under his great-grandmother's quilt, one hand resting on a small wooden cross she'd pressed into his palm, Jacob sat at the table with the old documents stacked in front of him. He ran his fingers over his great-grandfather's name, over the lines that marked the ridge he now called home. Then he bowed his head. Thank you, he whispered into the quiet. Not just for this land, or whatever it might bring. Thank you for bringing us back when I had nothing to offer. For not letting homeless be the last word over my boy. For turning a poor woman's mountain house into the place you met us. The fire popped softly, sending up a brief shower of sparks. In the next room, his grandmother's breathing rose and fell steady, like a slow, contented hymn. Outside, the wind moved through the pines in a low hush that sounded, to Jacob, less like loneliness now, and more like a blessing. The mountain hadn't changed, but he had. The real secret inside the house wasn't just the hidden map, the old claims, or the forgotten wealth resting deep in the earth. It was this. Somewhere between the broken roads and this crooked chimney, God had given a homeless father and his son something no contract could ever guarantee. A home, a purpose, and a chance to start a new story on very old ground.